What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to JJD TV. I'm your host, Josh, and for today's episode, we brought in a very special guest, as there was a nice little picture going around on Twitter for the Canadian men's national team of going through the depth chart. So I plucked that idea and thought that I'd invite Alex Gangué-Ruzic on here to basically help me come up with a depth chart, and I'm pretty excited to have him on here. So Alex, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate coming on the show. Excited to dive into this. We saw the depth chart. We had our opinions on it. We all have our differing opinions. I'm sure even today we'll as we'll go through it, as we build this, we'll go through all those opinions. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah, I am too, and it was pretty cool because we saw the US had one of theirs, and it was pretty cool to see. And someone had a great idea and made the graphic for themselves. I didn't fully agree with it, but I tagged the person and said unbelievable graphic, and I hope that they'll enjoy ours as well. So there's a lot of debate, and it's pretty interesting when you go through a depth chart to see kind of where the areas of strength are, where the areas of weakness, and also is curious to try to do it in a formation that we kind of thought would fit. So I was talking to Alex before, and we kind of went with the 3-4-3. We know that there's a 3-5-2, the 4-2-3-1. There's a lot of different formations, but when I pictured the Canadian men's national team, and I think Alex agrees with me, I kind of focused it around that back four. And then using the 3-4-3, that way we got wing backs in and we got our wingers in there. So let's just kickstart it right away, Alex. I'm going to throw it over to you, and you're going to start with our keepers. And we made sure that we had 4 positions for every single position except for the center mids, which I'm just realizing we left 5 in, but that's all right. We'll leave those 5 in because one is a player that we don't know his future, and one is an uncapped player. So there you go. So there's my reasoning for that, Alex. So kick us started with the keepers, my man.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to start, it's pretty straightforward. I think it's a position that we've seen throughout the years. It is pretty straightforward. In goal, you got Milan Borjan. He's kind of the number one guy right now. And then hot on his heels, Maxime Crépeau. I think that's going to be a battle to watch over the next few years, especially if Borjan heads to MLS, as some rumors might point to. Obviously, right now he has that advantage playing in a top European league. Otherwise, you got James Pantemis in third, the CF Montreal goalkeeper. Had a pretty good year for Montreal after finally biding his time for a few years. And then lastly, Dayne Sinclair. He's kind of hopped up and down the depth chart over the past year. It's wild to think a year ago he was starting for Minnesota United. He was the guy, and then he kind of fell out of favor. And then by the end of the year, he got his chance. But he rounds off the depth chart at number 4. So
yeah, it's an interesting. I thought so too, but it's an interesting one with Dayne Sinclair because he was someone I thought so highly of, and he was getting those minutes at Minnesota, and I thought he was really going to have a bigger push in a couple seasons ago than Crépeau, and I was obviously wrong, as Crépeau turned out to be one of MLS's best and probably our future. But the Milan Borjan one's interesting too because obviously a player playing over in Europe, and because of the MLS obviously ending its season, a lot of people think, well, Crépeau's not playing, Borjan's the clear choice, which he may be the clear choice regardless, but a lot of people do forget that the Serbian league takes a big break as well. So really none of our 4 keepers are playing consistent minutes right now. And I just want to see, Alex, before we move on to the outside right center back position, if that bothers you at all, the fact that there's no keeper right now that is playing at the point of the next window.
I guess yes and no, because I mean, you obviously want your players to be in form, but I think if there's one position where form kind of gets thrown out of the window, it's goalkeeper. It's such a strange position where you'll see guys be ice cold for months, and they come in, they're fine. And I think because of that, for me, I'm just going to be curious to see how the battle for goalkeeper ends up going, because obviously Milan Borjan's the guy, but what if he comes in and has a bad camp? Is Max Crépeau really close enough to supplant him? I think, I mean, the take I've always had is, while Borjan might be the better goalkeeper, or was the better goalkeeper for a while now, Crépeau has always been the better fit for this Canadian team, and we've seen it when he's played. He fits really well with this team. So I think it's going to be Borjan's net unless something drastic happens, but I'd like to see how close the battle it is in John Herdman's eyes.
Yeah, and I've said like the talent alone, and I've heard this as well because there's a lot of shouts for Crépeau to start. I personally believe in Herdman's mind it's Borjan through and through, which is why there hasn't been that much debate. But it's interesting because Borjan hasn't really given Herdman a reason not to trust him yet. So time will tell, but it's nice to know that at least we have a solid backup. And even looking at different national teams like Zach Steffen, yes, he's playing with Manchester City. He is a backup keeper. So it's somewhat of a similar example. But that's an interesting one. And those are our 4 keepers for our depth chart. Now we're going to head over to the outside right center back one, which when we came up with our list, this is the one that kind of got me because this is where we had to dig down a little bit more. But in my opinion, the number one, and it's not really a debate, is Alistair Johnston. And then going down that list, you see players who haven't really been around the national team too much. And second in the depth chart, we put Waterman, followed by Stirring and Dunn. So that's a bit of an issue, and that's how it shows how important Johnston has been to this national team, especially if something happened and he isn't able to make a game through red card or picks up a knock. It's interesting to see. So, Alex, what do you think about that list, and how soon do you think we might see Waterman join up with the national team?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's as you mentioned, Alistair Johnston's importance is paramount. I think you look through the stats, he led Canada in minutes last year for a reason. I think he had the most starts. He played a bunch of consecutive games. He's kind of the guy. But after that, Joel Waterman's an interesting one. He's played outside center back for Montreal. He's a very good passer of the ball, so that kind of fits in the Canadian system. One thing that has troubled him is he lacks a bit of foot speed. So sometimes you'll see him kind of get burned a bit on the outside, which is something that Johnston tends to avoid. So, that is one thing to watch for. But I think Waterman will probably see him, I'd say, to start the year, be on the cusp of this squad. I think, especially in a 26-man squad, he's certainly an option. But after that, the two names we have are kind of interesting. I think Frank Stirring, right now, you can tell he was a good player whenever he's played for Canada. It's only been 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this year. You tell he's got a good left foot. He's a solid defender. For me, the problem is he's just at too low of a level. The second Austrian division, he's kind of on a team that's bound for relegation to the third division. So with Stirring, for me, it's until he finds a new club, it's a bit harder. But the fourth name on our list is one that I'm kind of bullish on, and that's Julian Dunn. He just completed a very good move to HamKam over in Norway. They just got promoted from the second division. They're going to be in the first division. The Norwegian division is a very, very solid circuit. So I'm really bullish on Julian Dunn. I think in a few months' time, with how the depth is at right center back, if he gets 10, 15 good games in for HamKam, I'd put him number 2 behind Johnston ahead of Waterman. So the guy I'm really watching out of all this is maybe for now Waterman, but further down the road, I'm definitely keeping an eye on Julian Dunn.
And I think it could be perfect timing as well, because I do agree with you in terms of Waterman's foot speed, which is why, in my opinion, for Montreal this season, if you're looking at that back three, I mean, you have Kamal Miller out at the outside left, you have Alistair Johnston at the outside right. I see Waterman get put in towards the middle, where that's where his speed can be utilized a little bit more, having the coverage of Kamal Miller and Alistair Johnston. But just for the time being in our depth chart, it made sense to put him there and allow, hopefully, Dunn to develop, like you said. The Austrian second division and then the Norwegian first division is going to be a big gap. So I think Dunn definitely has a big opportunity to push up. I'm excited to see what he does, because like we've kind of seen here and try to show you guys, that is where I think the depth is really going to show. And I'm curious to see what type of players are going to be able to step up, and Dunn is absolutely a solid one there. So that's our outside right center backs. And now we're going to move on to our central center backs, and we're going to let Alex kickstart it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, pretty straightforward to start, Josh. Obviously, we got Steven Vittoria, captain. Sometimes, center back, scores free kick goals too, apparently, although we haven't seen that for Canada. Not much to be said there. After we got Daniel Henry, played a solid year over in South Korea. He might leave certain memories in some Canadian fans' minds, but on his day, he can be quite the defender. Otherwise, you got Mandrakar James, the forgotten man, who's always lurking, playing in solid teams in Europe, but hasn't gotten a call for Canada since 2020, and it's officially since, I think, 2019 or 2018. It's been a while. And then rounding it off, we threw in a bit of a wild card name, but it shows at center back there are a few wild cards, like we mentioned, to watch out for. It's KARIFA Yao, had a fantastic year last year for Cavalry, and now is returning to CF Montreal, who obviously, like Canadian defenders, could be battling someone like Joel Waterman for a spot in the starting 11 for Montreal. And if he does, he's a young player. He's got he's a big body, fast runner, good technically. He is another potential late riser. So I'm pretty excited about this central center backs group. I mean, Vittoria and Henry are kind of the veterans, but I'm really bullish on Yao at the bottom of the depth chart there.
And I'm going to make a similar point to Dunn as I am going to for Yao, because I think that when you're looking at this list, Vittoria is the old guard. He, in my opinion, can play that central center back role very well. He does it at club level. He is a set piece specialist. We've seen his, at the same set piece over and over again. Eustachio picking him out backdoor. He's such an important player, but he is getting older in age. And I don't know if the national team has the trust in Henry to kind of take that next step. I think he'll be a good depth player to have in the squad. James, who knows if he'll get a call. He's having to, not him really personally, but his club level is the club has been terrible. Viola has been, I think they're still bottom of the basement of their respective leagues. So he's got a big opportunity to push towards that second spot as well. And then with Vitoria slowly coming to the end of his career, it could be a good opportunity for him to really establish himself in Montreal and potentially have to battle at Waterman to see who's going to be playing alongside in that middle of the back three between Miller and Johnston. And it's pretty exciting to see because he did have a great season in the CPL, and it's another test to seeing what type of talent can come and get tested out in the CPL and then hopefully make that jump to the MLS this season, Alex.
Yeah, no, I'm very curious to see how his integration goes with Montreal this year. I think, they've obviously cleared up some room for him. No more Kiki Struna, Rudy Camacho is gone. It's, there's a spot there. I mean, they obviously signed, I think it was Gabriel Corbo, the Italian center back from Bologna. So obviously he's going to be in the mix and is a candidate to start. But Montreal's going to have Champions League. They're going to have MLS. They're going to have, the Canadian Championship. Surely there's a spot for KARIFA Yao to make an impact. So I'm going to be very curious because, he played in a back three too last year for Calgary, who likes to play a back three. Montreal plays a back three. Canada plays a back three. It'd kind of be written in the stars, wouldn't it?
I think so. And I've thrown that out here just because I just think it's fun and that you've already mentioned Bologna, that connection between Bologna and Montreal, but Johnston moving on over to Bologna, Waterman going to the right and Yao going to the middle. I'm just gonna toss that out there for Alex to digest as we move on to the outside left center backs, which we've known the lefties in this group have been pretty decent for that side. It's a position that I think Kamal Miller's kind of taken on his own. And in our depth chart right now, we have Miller leading the way with Kennedy, Cornelius, and Bassong as well. So those are four pretty good names, and three of them playing in Europe. Two of them playing in Europe, but Kamal Miller, in my opinion, could definitely play in Europe. So I think there's a lot to say about that. And Kamal Miller and Kennedy both have had really good moments with the national team so far, kind of each in their own way, trying to make that position their own. But I think due to Kennedy's injuries, I think Miller's kind of taken that role. And I just want to see what Alex has to say about it and who he thinks, or how close does he think the battle between Miller and Kennedy really is.
Yeah, for sure, Josh. I mean, it's a great question. I think a year ago, I guess not a year ago, March 2021, June 2021, it was Scott Kennedy's role because Kamal Miller was injured and Scott Kennedy had stepped up and no one had known anything about him. All of a sudden, this tall guy playing in Germany who can pass the ball 40 yards with his left foot without, much effort. It was exciting. And then, you go into the fall, Kennedy had that tough game against the U.S. Kamal Miller stepped up. It just shows, I think, for me, it's going to come down to who's in better form that window and who takes their opportunity. I think it's so close between the two. I think they're, within a year or two of age. They're both big left-footed center backs. I think level-wise right now, Kennedy has a slight advantage just because playing on a top echelon club in the second Bundesliga. We have to remember the Bundesliga is a smaller league than most European leagues, just 18 teams. So technically teams at the top of the second Bundesliga are what you'd consider bottom echelon first division teams. He's kind of at that higher level versus someone like Kamal Miller. So he does have that advantage, but Kamal Miller's been the one playing regularly. He's been the one not only playing, but borderline dominating his position for Montreal, helped them, make a push towards the playoffs. They were unsuccessful, but he also did great in the Canadian Championship. For me, it's just going to come down to what week, what month, who's in better form, and just letting them battle. And I think that's why this left center back position is one of the healthier positions on the Canadian team, because you've had that competition. You've had Kennedy and Miller pushing each other, and hopefully like we mentioned with the right center back, hopefully something like that can start to happen with Waterman and Johnston or Johnson and Dunn or whoever it ends up being, because we're seeing the fruits of it at left center back. And heck, we'll throw in Derek Cornelius. We haven't talked about him much, but the Greek league's a pretty solid league. He's been playing well there. He's looked a lot better since his time at the Whitecaps, just because he's been playing regularly, which was a problem at the Whitecaps. They weren't playing him. I think that three-headed monster duo of those three are going to push each other, and it's going to be nice to see that competition. And then lastly, Zorhan Bassong, he's kind of it's going to be tough for him to get in. I think he'll have honestly a better shot at left wing back, which he also plays. But it's nice to have him there as a depth option if needed. He can play left center back. He can play left back. He can probably even play left wing. It's good to have that versatility if needed. Yeah,
the versatility would definitely be big for him because, in my opinion, those three are just they dominate that position. It is what it is. And it was interesting that you mentioned Cornelius as well, because I am a big fan of Derek Cornelius. I do like him. I know that towards the end of the Whitecaps trying to find that move, it was a little bit tough for him. But the big thing is that he made that jump and he went to Greece and now he's playing. And he's playing a ton of minutes. And it's good to see. And I know he started a game for Canada and I thought he played relatively well with it. I think still Cornelius is just up against Kamal Miller, who, similar to Alistair Johnston, those two have just become so important for John Herdman. He trusts them. The one thing I really like about Kamal Miller is his recovery speed. There's been so many times in that grit to his game where if anyone gets burnt, he's able to cover back and he gets in a good challenge a lot of the times. And it's going to be hard, but it's great to see. It's a good depth between those three. And I'm curious to see how they're going to battle it out. And I agree with you in terms of form, but I do think Cornelius is just under. And I don't know if he will get that nod to start a game quite yet just because of those three, but we'll have to see. And, I mean, the depth is there and it's good to have. And maybe even one of them could switch into that central center back role because we know that, there could be potentially a little bit of options there. But we're going to move on over now to the right wing back position. And I believe it's my turn to go through it. No, it's not. It's your turn to go through it. All right. Right wing back stop. Alex, lead it on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll dive right into it. It's a one man's position right now, kind of a more of a clear front runner. That's Richie Laryea. Pretty straightforward. He's been excellent for Canada this year. He's had some European links all throughout the year. Turkish League Championship. I think even a Premier League, if I'm not mistaken. He's destined for big things. Not much to be said there. After that, though, the depth chart is wide open. This is probably the position. I don't know if you had the same issue, Josh, but this is the one where I spent the most research, just finding names, comparing, coming up to our list. But eventually we settled for Zachary Broguiar. I think that one's pretty straightforward. Yeah. The second name, he's been good for Montreal. Just had some injury issues, but when he was healthy, I thought he was very good. The next one this is where things get interesting. Jaquil Marshall-Rudy played some right back for Toronto last year. Look, surprisingly comfortable for a 17-year-old that usually plays on the wing. He showed some good things there. So I think maybe long-term, considering Canada plays that back five, maybe right wing back could be a spot where he claws in, especially if he heads to a club like a Liverpool, say, or something of that echelon. And then lastly, this is one at least I petitioned to get included because I think, it shows A, how wide open this position is, but also B, some of the talent playing in the Canadian Premier League. We already shouted out KARIFA Yao, but we got KADIN CHUNG, Pacific right back. He was so good throughout the year. I mean, I'm a bit biased just because I got to see a little more Pacific games out here on the West Coast. But every time I saw him, be it in the CPL or even when they played the Whitecaps, he was always lights out. So I think I have him on the fourth name at the chart, but it shows how wide open this list is just to shut out guys like, say, Mo Farsi, who when he finds a club can certainly get into this discussion, or just names like that, really.
Yeah, we said honorable mention to Godinho. We were debating between him and Chung for the depth chart. We kind of pushed for Chung, but yeah, it's interesting to know. And there's other players who would obviously go down to those positions as well. I mean, we've seen Buchanan play there, who we'll get to. I think he's better up the pitch, and similar now to Corbiano, who's doing it at a wingback position for Sheffield Wednesday. But these are just some other names to get in here because we wanted for each position. And CBG, we kind of know what we expect, but Marshall-Rudy is going to be an interesting one. And the reason that I was kind of pushing for him for this wing back position is similar to kind of Buchanan, how we've seen him down at right back a few times for the Revs, slowly integrating to the wing back up to the attacking. And I think that's going to be somewhat of a similar position for him. And the fact that he has played at right back, that gives him some of that defensive awareness to be able to attack, to defend, and a wing back kind of role fits in him. And he's got a big name right now that's going around because he's being linked to clubs like Liverpool and Arsenal. And you have to take that into consideration, that this kid could have a big future and be a vital part of this national team going forward. So we're not saying that's where he's going to end up playing for the national team, but it's a cool little shout, I thought, to put him in there. But now it's time to move on to some of the meat of this depth chart, because we put 5 names in because I forgot to take 2 though, but it's fine. The first one we're going to do for the center mids, we're going to go through it. It's going to be Atiba Hutchinson, who, I mean, 39 years old. I don't know how much longer our man of fine wine can keep it going, but he obviously, when fit, when healthy, we know what he can do. And even at this age, he's still doing it. After that, we have Zorio, Wotherspoon, Fraser, and Mitrovic, which is an interesting one. Osorio, we know that he's an important part of this national team. He can play a little bit further up the pitch when needed, but has always had a big role for this Canadian men's national team. Wotherspoon, unfortunately, with that massive injury, we wanted to include him because he's become a part of this national team, but it's a tough injury to pretty much rule him out for the season. Liam Fraser, who's had a good chunk of minutes for Canada as well. I'm a fan of Liam Fraser. I liked what he's done at the Crew so far, and I think that when needed, he can play a role for this national team. And when he's come on as a sub, he's played relatively well. And then Mitrovic, the one that I'm kind of excited for. He's the one that we put towards the bottom because obviously he's uncapped, playing in Serbia right now, been linked to a bunch of different clubs as well. And it seems like he's going to commit to Canada. So I'm really excited to see what this kid can do. He's a very talented young player. I think he's exactly what we need, especially with Wotherspoon going out. But Alex, let's get your thoughts on that list.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to start, Atiba Hutchinson, not much else to say. Yeah, he's a couple weeks shy of his 39th birthday. He's scored 2 goals, in 2 games. As of us talking, he's literally, he scored just like, I think 10, 15 minutes ago in the Super Cup. He's continuing to get things done at this age. Who knows how long it's going to be. We said he was going to retire 5 years ago. He's still going strong. I think after the World Cup, knock on wood, I think that would looks like the end of the road, but who knows at this point. I wouldn't put it past him being at 2026 based on how he's been going. And then otherwise, Jonathan Osorio is an interesting one just because he's been one of the guys, I think if you look back at 2021, he's kind of one of those guys who had his stock go up the highest versus where it was at the beginning of the year. He just always plugged away. He started a lot of games. He'd come off the bench, no matter the role he filled. He always seemed to find a way to impress. He scored that big goal at the Azteca against Mexico. He's always kind of there for the big moments. There's a lot of with Osorio's game. He's 29, but he seemed to be getting better every year. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes now in the future. Obviously, he's still at Toronto FC, but he's mentioned that he wants to go to Europe now. He knows that in the national team, as we've seen with this list, the competition is increasing very quickly. So he wants to move to Europe. If he moves to Europe, it'll be interesting to see where he lands. So Osorio is one to watch. Wotherspoon, it's tough to see his knee injury. I think it'll keep him out till September. So again, Canada makes the World Cup, knock on wood, all that. He can be there. He'll be an option. But for now, for the rest of the journey in terms of them getting there, he won't be there. And that's tough. He's an interesting one because you listen to John Herdman speak about him. He's kind of one of those guys where he does a lot of the work behind the scenes. Like every time in training, he always trains very well. No matter who's at training, Herdman says he's always one of the top 5 performers in training. So I guess they do kind of this rating system at training to see who's performing well. And Wotherspoon's always in the top 5, no matter who's there. Shows how impressive that is considering some of the talent. So it's just tough to not have him there because even when he wasn't playing, it sounded like he was always a key name in the dressing room, key name in training, always happy to whenever he did get minutes. So it's going to be a tough blow to lose him. But like you mentioned, Liam Fraser is a good name to have next up. Going to be interested to see if he goes to Toronto or if they end up loaning him back to the Crew or if he ends up finding a new club. Because he looked really good for Columbus last year, despite their struggles after the championship season. And then lastly, Stefan Mitrovic. I think he's we've kind of had this theme of younger guys at the bottom of the depth chart that can make that rise. Mitrovic fits that to a T. I mean, you look at some of the clubs linked to. If he goes to Club Brugge, for example, at Tejan Buchanan, or even Red Star Belgrade, massive club, obviously, in Serbia, by the end of the year, this could completely change. It could be 3rd, 2nd, maybe not starting, but certainly right on the cusp of it. So I'm excited about Mitrovic, just 19. He scored a bunch of goals this year for Redniki. So excited to see what the future brings for him.
Yeah, and being linked, I mean, a couple other names, Leicester City's in the mix, which I don't know if it's the right club for him at this moment. We know how important playing time is for him. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely Hutch getting a little bit older, the injury to Wotherspoon, we want that depth in there. And I think there's a little bit more attacking edge to Mitrovic's game, which is pretty good to see. But now there's still another 5 center mids we need to discuss on. So we're going to throw it back over to Alex to get the other half of our central midfielder position.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the left-sided center mids, first off, we got Stefan Eustáquio, Canada's, star man in the midfield. Not much else to say about him. He's been holding it down all year long and will continue to do so. He's young. He's shown to be an Iron Man in terms of minutes. After that, you got Mark Anthony Kaye, the Colorado man, been linked with to go to Europe several times. Will he make that jump this year? Finally, who knows? But he looked very good for Colorado, playing in all sorts of roles: CM, left wing back, left wing. It was weird to see him play some of those roles, but he looked good in whatever he ended up getting thrown in. That was the same could be said for Canada. Otherwise, you got Samuel Piette, kind of a veteran of the national team. He's kind of one of those guys where he'll always be in the squad. He won't start, and he'll do his role. And there's something good about having guys like that, because you have to remember there's a young team, and Piette's already, I think, the third most capped or second most capped player, depending on if Hutchinson is there. It's good to have on a young team that doesn't really have many caps. He's been around. He's still only 26, which is wild to think how many games he's played for Canada. And then rounding off is where we have the two Scottish League number 10s, number 8s, Harry Paton, Scott Arfield. I think both of those names are very intriguing. Harry Paton, a little younger, playing for Ross County. He's impressed, got a call up at the Gold Cup. He looks like a very solid playmaking kind of number 8. Could be a good piece for Canada. And then we have the always controversial, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on him, Josh, but Scott Arfield, very good player, as we know. He's kind of had a bit of a hiatus from the national team as he was kind of focusing on his club career. Sounds like, John Herdman is open to having him back. Sounds like Arfield is open to coming back, but right now he's going to have to work his way back up to the depth chart. 2 years ago, he was locked in starter. Right now, he's a little lower on the depth chart, but certainly he could work his way up if he were to come back and work hard and play.
Yeah, I think this half of the center mids is a very interesting one, because one, Eustachio, like we've talked about, has become the most important player in that midfield. Kay, just an incredible player all around. He'll get a lot of those starting minutes, given the fact that when Hutch doesn't start, usually it's Kay, and he's obviously younger, had a good season at the Rapids as well. Piette is that type of experienced player you want to come in to close out a game. If it's 1-0, 75th-ish minute, you better believe Piette's going to come on, bring a little bit of leadership, a little calmness to that game to try to relax it. And the other two Scottish lads, I'm a big fan of Harry Paton. I know he's playing for Ross County, who had a pretty poor start to the season. They're starting to pick it up a little bit, but he's always been such a good contributor to that team, playing whether it's playing in the 4-3-3 or in that 4-2-3-1. He's gotten a good chunk of assists as well, and I like to see him get a little bit more of a taste with the national team. And then the controversial one, which is not just controversial because of everything, but it's because every time I ask the question, there's a good split. There's still a good split of people who want to see him come back and people who don't. The one thing that I think is interesting with Scott Arfield is that he was an important player, and we don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes to see this time away from the national team. But what I do know is that he's got a new lease on life right now under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst at Rangers. He's getting a ton of minutes. He's playing very, very well for a team that is dominating the Scottish League, a very good league in Europe. So if the players, and he can come in and not disrupt anything, he can come back in with the right attitude, and knowing that Wotherspoon's injured and with the potential of players not being available and all that, we'd want him there. We'd be dumb not to give him a chance to at least impress. So I'm open to seeing him come back as long as he comes in with the right attitude and doesn't disrupt the camp.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take a Scott Arfield, in a heartbeat if you're looking at his form, the level he's playing at. Just if you watch him play, I mean, I've watched, for example, when he was kind of frozen out the Rangers squad and he made his first appearance back in Europa League, like you can just tell he's got a different class about him. So he's kind of one of those situations, if you're Canada, you'd love to have him back, because having a guy like Scott Arfield come off the bench would be huge for Canada if you're playing like a Honduras and El Salvador, a US, just to have that sort of firepower on the bench. The beautiful thing is, though, if you're Canada, if it doesn't work out with Arfield, the nice thing is you got a Harry Paton who looks like he looks like a guy who could maybe in a few years be close to a Scott Arfield level. He's still young. I think he's just 23. Obviously, Arfield is a good decade older than him, if I'm not mistaken. It's nice to know that there are options, or MITROVIĆ too, as we mentioned, and there's a few other names we had to leave off in central midfield. So I think it's with Arfield, it's if he can come in, fantastic. If not, you know what? This isn't Canada 5 years ago where you need a guy like Arfield. If he isn't there, you've got other options. But it would be nice to have him back in the fold, I think, just if you're talking what he can bring talent-wise and the class and what he could bring to that midfield position.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm not going to bank on the fact that he's coming back, but if the option is there, knowing that he's not even the Arfield who's sitting on the bench, not collecting minutes, that he's playing, that he's in good form, it's something that John Herdman is definitely going to consider, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But that rounds up our stacked central midfielder positions, as we're now going to move on to the left wing back position. And we did throw Davies down there. We know that he can obviously play a little bit further up the pitch, but I do like seeing him being able to run at players with a little bit more, stride when he gets to play from the wing back position. So we toss Alphonso Davies at left wing back. We got Samuel Adekubi, who I think has probably been the Canadian to benefit most from a transfer over this summer, which I think he's doing such an incredible job in Turkey and with an overachieving side. We have CHOINIÈRE in there, and we have GUTIÉRREZ as well. So I think after the top two, I mean, I'm a big fan of CHOINIÈRE. There's a lot of Montreal wing backs / center backs in this team. We could literally have an entire back five of Montreal players. But I mean, depending on who's going to be in there, I think you're usually going to see Davies or Adekubi. It's going to be tough. Maybe even Larea going over to the left wing back position, what we've seen in the past. But I'm curious to get your takes, obviously, on the top two, and then seeing where the depth chart goes on, and if we'll see CHOINIÈRE potentially in a camp sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, Alphonso Davies, not much else to be said about what he's accomplished. I won't, spend 10 minutes listing off all that or what he's done for Canada. I think, again, it just ultimately comes down to the opposition that you're up against. I think John Herdman, he's slowly getting used to finding that right balance. I think he's still seeing some learning moments where, okay, maybe you shouldn't have played him at left wing against Costa Rica, a team that sits deeper, just because Davies likes to, when you're playing a low block, it's better to have Davies from this left wing back. But then as we saw, when he's playing like a Mexico or a Panama, who is playing more of a high line, he's perfect in that kind of forward role. So the thing is with Davies, it's ultimately going to come down to who are you playing, what kind of style they play. If it's a high line, you play him up front. If it's a low line, you kind of play him in this wing back. And the nice thing is Sam Adekubi is there no matter what happens. And I think the great thing is with Adekubi's emergence, you've seen Herdman almost, want to play Davies up the field more, just because that means you're getting Sam Adekubi on the park. And I think that's huge. I think, like you mentioned, he's benefited so much from this move to Turkey. I mean, personally, I've been banging on the Adekubi drum for about 2-3 years now, even when he was in Norway, just because he's always kind of had that offensive talent, the willingness to get forward. But he's taken a whole new step in his game in Turkey. He's gone above and beyond what where he was at in Norway. So I think having those two there, it's nice to have, because if you have Davies at left wing back, it's great. If you move him up the pitch, it's nice to know that you're not getting a significant drop off with a guy like Adekubi, who can get forward and can get involved. And then otherwise, it's going to be interesting to see between Mathieu CHOINIÈRE and then obviously Christian Gutierrez, Montreal and Whitecaps respectively. I think CHOINIÈRE is a very, very bright riser last year. I think he was one of the guys whose stock improved the most and didn't get a call up, just because at the start of the year, he was a forgotten man with Montreal. He'd suffered a lot of injuries over the last few years. By the end of it, he was bossing it at left wing back. He's not even a wing back. He's a right-footed player just thrown in there, and he looks like he's played there his whole life. I'm very high on him. He's just 22. I think if that's what he showed in just his first full year there, give him a few years there, he's going to be boss in the position. So I'm excited about CHOINIÈRE. And then Gutierrez was fantastic for the Whitecaps when healthy. He made a massive difference. There's a reason why they're able to get rid of a guy like Ali Adnan, was that they had Christian Gutierrez playing there. And I think for Canada, it would be nice to see him get a shot there, because if he could really, I'm not saying Adekubi-like impact, because that's obviously a very high bar, but I think he's very similar to Adekubi in a lot of ways and could provide something close to that impact if given a shot. So I'm curious to see how CHOINIÈRE and Gutierrez this season starts. I think right now, like you mentioned, CHOINIÈRE is probably just a bit higher based on the fact that Gutierrez suffered with injuries, but that battle for those spots can be very intense.
Yeah, absolutely. And CHOINIÈRE, like you said, had such a good season, in my opinion, with Montreal, and getting those minutes, getting that consistent form, which is why, even though he's a right footer, that's why I had him a little bit higher on my list. And Adekubi was an interesting one as well, because I always knew he had that offense to his game, but I feel like maybe it was nerves, or he just felt a little restricted at the beginning playing for Canada, and then he just decided to bring out some flair, bring out some flash, and you're seeing nutmegs, you're seeing turns, and he's definitely got that offensive side to him. And then also the greatest, I think, celebration in Canadian soccer history. So we're a big shout out to Adekubi, and it's good to see, knowing that we can utilize Davies in different ways. And now we're going to move on to the wing positions, and we're going to start with the right wings, which we're going to let Alex touch on. And the first name, we'll let him go through the list, but the first name's an interesting one we tossed over there. So Alex, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think with just to preface the two winger positions, there's a lot of fluidity there. I think you got guys who can play multiple positions. And the first one we have is obviously fits the bill. Kyle Larin kind of played wing for Besiktas, played more in a front two for Canada. I haven't really seen him play much in that wing position. But right now in a 3-4-3, we kind of have him at right wing just because it's hard to not start him and David in a theoretical front three. It's hard to imagine benching either a guy who scored 14 goals for Canada last year alone and is the co-leading goal scorer, or a guy in Jonathan David who leads the Liga in goal scoring. So we have both. Obviously, that's a hint, not much of a surprise for the striker position, obviously. But yeah, we got Larin at right wing, Tajon Buchanan also behind Kyle Larin. He just made his big move to Club Brugge, had a fantastic year for New England. Looked really good every time he played for Canada. Excited to see what he can do once he gets that top European flight experience under his belt. Then after we got Theo Corbeanu over at Sheffield Wednesday. After a slow start, ended up finding his feet as a wing back, but we know what he can do as a winger. He's very two-footed. He's good with left and his right foot. He can cross a ball. He can shoot a ball. He's your prototypical winger, but can also do some damage as a wing back, which is good to know. And I'm excited to see what Corbeanu can do for Canada, especially as he moves up. He's just 19 or 20, if I'm not mistaken. He's gonna, hopefully he can go back to Wolves after this loan is done and do some damage in the Premier League. But so far, he's been doing great in League One. And then lastly, for now, we got Charles Andreas-Brym. He's kind of, it's been an interesting name. He was kind of lost in the weeds there, moved over to the second Dutch division, a solid division, has been playing over there for Eindhoven, doing a solid job every time I've seen him play. Can play striker on the wing, kind of rounds off a solid list. And there's a lot of names, and I think the one theme is as we'll see when we touch on the left wingers in a few minutes, there's a lot of guys who can kind of play both wings, and it makes it a really interesting position in terms of who actually slots in on the wing on any given day. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing with Corbeanu, I mean, like we said, playing at the wing back position, he's mostly, I think, for Wednesday played as a left wing back. He likes running into space, likes going 1v1, something that he's very good at. Buchanan, can't talk enough about. He's obviously been one of the biggest surprise. Him, Eustachio have really helped this side really kind of coming full circle into areas that we needed. But Larin's an interesting one. And the reason I wanted to put him on the wing for this depth chart is because he actually, which a lot of people do know, he plays mostly as a winger for Besiktas. We know he can play up front. They play in that 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1 system. He usually plays it on the left-hand side. And when he plays for Canada, a lot of people are under the assumption that when we play in, say, a 3-5-2, 4-4-2, whatever it is, get those two strikers up front, which you'd assume is going to be Larin and David. A lot of the times they don't really jive. So if I remember correctly, I don't think Herman has ever really used him as a winger. So I'm very curious to see, one, because Larin does play wing mostly, and that David and Larin don't quite fit the bill playing as a dual striker. Maybe in this 3-4-3, 4-2-3-1, whatever it is, you move Larin outside with potentially Buchanan and then David up front. Thoughts, Alex?
I'm 100% on board with that. It's certainly an idea I'd love to see explored. I mean, I think it sucks to lose a bit of a number 10-esque role, but the nice thing is Jonathan David can kind of play that false nine role and fill the gaps, and you kind of have Larin and Buchanan working off of him. You have Davies and Larea making overlapping runs. There's a lot to like there for Canada. I think the thing is about Kyle Larin, you look at his frame and you assume, he's a number 9. He's a big marauding number 9, but his game's so much more than that. He's such a smart player for his size. You see it for Besiktas. He finds pockets so well. He's good with his feet. He loves to cut inside and kind of, he occupies such good channels too. If you think about it, it's so good to have I think he's 6'1", 6'2" player, just dominating fullbacks at the back post for crosses and finding soft areas in the box. So just if you look at the way Larin's game is, he has a lot of tendencies. I wouldn't call him necessarily a winger. I think it's more of like an inside forward role that we can call the Kyle Larin role, since he's kind of mastered it. And I think for Canada, it'd be nice to see him get that shot just because they have the wing backs. They have the formation to make it work should they try it.
Yeah, I agree, especially if you play him on the left, which he's a little bit more comfortable with. Buchanan on the right, he can then also have a little bit of the hold-up play to allow Alphonso Davies to run in beside him. So I definitely think it's something that Herman should look into, because everyone who's a Canadian national team fan wants Larin and David on the pitch together. But playing in that dual striker role, maybe it's not the option. Maybe it's time to see what he can do in the wing, because I don't think he's ever done it. But we're going to move on over now to the left wing position, and we got a player who I'm very fond of is Liam Miller leading the way. I think this is the type of player who made the correct move. I think bouncing back and forth on loan army in a Premier League club isn't always the answer. And he made a risk, and he made an interesting choice to go to Basel over in the Swiss league. And it's shown that it's the right decision, because he is getting a ton of minutes. He's scoring goals. He's getting assists, playing European football, lining up in a 4-2-3-1, playing as that left attack. He made exactly where I wanted to see him, getting a good partnership with Arthur up front as well. So I can't say enough about Miller. I still think in that front three, I'd probably have Buchanan, Larin, David, and then Miller just on the outside. But an unbelievable player to come off the bench. The old guard as well, Junior Hoylett, who can kind of play it on either wing. He came back with Reading, who scored a beautiful goal, got a brace at the weekend as well. So good to see him there. He'll be experienced. He in my opinion, is very good also in that kind of that two-striker system up front, playing a little bit behind David or Larin, whoever it may be. And we have Schaffelberg, who I think is taking a big step in himself. And then a player a lot of people forget about is Tyler Pasher as well, to round it off. It's a lot of interesting players. A lot of these players can swap between the wings, but there's a lot of depth there. And the winger position, who seemed to be an issue for a while, which is why I think the two-striker system was just so used, starting to show that there's some real potential there. And Alex, let's get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the left wing position, there's a lot of versatile options. I think Liam Miller looks his best on the left wing, but he can play striker, can play right wing. I think Junior Hoylett as well. He can play left wing, right wing, striker, number 10. He's done it all. I think he's even played wing back in his day, back when he was at Cardiff. So he's got that versatility too. I think, yeah, those two up to start at left wing. I think Miller's just, you look at his game, you don't realize how quick he is with the ball, how powerful his shot can be, that he's, pretty two-footed as well. He scores some nice goals with his left. He scores some nice goals with his right. He's kind of that prototypical winger, and you can really tell what a move to a big club like Basel has done for his confidence, for his form, his technique. People, this maybe isn't the Basel of 5-10 years ago when you had guys like Mo Salah and, huge names going through, but this is still historically a big club. The Swiss league is still a very solid competition. So I've been very excited by Miller's progress. He's been scoring for fun in that Swiss league. But then, yeah, Hoylett's kind of the wild card afterwards, because, playing it for a middling Reading team, it was good just to see him get a club after he was a free agent, after Cardiff obviously released him. But the thing with Hoylett is you see his class whenever he plays. No matter what level he's at, he's pretty consistent. If it's Premier League, if it's Championship, if it's Canada. And that's why he's such a big part of this Canadian team. He's kind of one of those guys that, yeah, he's maybe not on your starting 11 for a big game if you have everyone healthy, but he can make a very good super sub. And as soon as one or two guys go down injured, he'll always put up a great performance no matter where he plays. So I just like Hoylett's consistency and just the class that he brings to the field. But then it's going to be interesting to see what Jacob Schaffelberg ends up doing. Hopefully Toronto can give him more minutes this year, even though they've brought in some very good players, like, a guy like Lorenzo Insigne. Obviously he's going to get starting priority over a guy like Jacob Schaffelberg, but maybe they can play together, or maybe Schaffelberg ends up going on loan to a good club. I think he just needs to play. It would be criminal if after the year the ending of the year that he has, that he gets, gets shut out of minutes. So hopefully Toronto gives him minutes at a good level, because he deserves it. He looked so good last year when he got the minutes, just because it was the confidence. You kind of always knew with Schaffelberg for a few years now that he had the skill, but the way he was taking guys on, just crossing the ball, shooting it, that sort of confidence really made a huge difference. And then lastly, it's going to be interesting to see. I think Tyler Pasher is he's kind of a guy who's maybe, I'd say he has a red flag on him. Not necessarily that's a bad thing. It's just he started the year so hot last year and kind of got his way into discussion. Then he kind of tailed off at the end. He didn't make a start for several months, just turned into kind of a super sub player for Houston. I think he needs a hot start to kind of keep his name in the conversation, just because there's going to be more and more names getting into the conversation. Say if Jaquil Marshall-Rudy, for example, starts playing regularly on the wing at his new club, and we're forgetting a guy like Jaden Nelson could be making a move out to Europe. You got a guy like Theo Bair who can play a striker on the wing. He's going to be playing in the top flight in Norway. It looks like there's just a lot of names that could crop up, especially younger names, whereas Pasher's 27. Pasher's going to need a strong start to cement his name, but I like him a lot as a player, and I hope he does. But he's kind of in a tough area right now where he needs to really impress, whereas a lot of guys are kind of they've been pressing and they've kind of pushed him down the depth chart.
Yeah, and just it's gonna be interesting. The winger position has become so important for Canada. It gives John Herdman that ability to kind of adapt different formations, and that's why we've seen so many of them. But I mean, one formation you can't really get rid of is striker, and it's one that we're going to touch on lastly before we edit this video. So Alex, it's all yours, my man. Go through our 4 strikers that we have for our depth chart for the striker position.
For sure, and I mean, kind of straightforward to start. Jonathan David, Liga top scorer, score of I think 18 goals for Canada. Not much else to be said there to lead us off. Leads the line whenever healthy. After a bit of a rough patch there for a few months for Canada, he really picked it up at the end of the year. A lot to be excited about heading into 2022. Otherwise, we got the new guy who's been, slowly impressing for his club, and he made a very good impression in the 15 or so minutes he got so far for his new country, Ike Ugbo. I'm very high on him personally, just from what I've watched him at Genk. He is a complete number 9. He honestly, if I'm going to be honest, he might be the best pure number 9 in the Canadian pool. And I just say that because Kyle Aaron, as we say, isn't really number 9. Jonathan David isn't really number 9. Ike Ugbo might be the guy that if you put all the tools together, he's the best number 9 in my eyes. Just the way he holds up the ball, the link up play, the way he contests for aerial balls, the runs he makes in the box. He is just, if you ever get a chance to watch a Genk game and he's starting, just watch the work that he does off the ball. He is a complete number 9. I am very excited to see kind of what he does when he gets more regular minutes for his club and then gets a chance to play for Canada because of those skills. I think he's kind of got an advantage right now in terms and I think that's why we've got him so high in the depth chart. And then afterwards, we've got 2 guys that are kind of interesting names. We've got Ayo Akinola, who, again, I think he can really push Ugbo in terms of how complete of a number 9 Akinola is for a young age. But obviously with injuries, being at TFC, his future being so uncertain, we have him 3rd on the depth chart. I think that could quickly change, say, if those rumors from last year of him heading to the top Turkish flight end up being true. I think that could change quickly, but we have to know, A, what the status of his rehab is, because this isn't, it's tough to suffer a major knee injury like that. If I'm not mistaken, it's not his first one either, which is always scary for a young player. But if he can recover fully and end up going to a big team, lots to like there. And then the controversial one, just because Lucas Cavallini, I mean, he's a tough one because on his day, he's a player, but he had an awful 2021. You can't sugarcoat it. Other than that hat trick against the Cayman Islands, which, to be fair, as much as those games are fun, it's the Cayman Islands. Cavallini hasn't, he struggled for his club. I think for the Caps, he had only, 3 goals, I think it was. He hasn't scored since July of 2021 for club or country. But then the thing is, no matter how poor of form he is, he always seems to do well for Canada. You look at the Mexico game where he came on, everyone's like, why is he came on? He actually did a pretty good job in the 10, 15 minutes he was there, just eating up fouls and eating the ball in the corner. So I think the thing is with Cavallini, he's always going to have a spot in the national team as long as he's in semi-decent form, just because he's been around the national team for almost a decade now. He's kind of brings that CONCACAF edge that no one other than maybe Richie Larea has. But the nice thing is with the emergence of Ugbo and Akinola and maybe some of those other names that I mentioned, like, say just a wild card like a Bear or some of the other names come up, Cavallini's going to really need to fight for his spot this year. So hopefully that leads to him being motivated for the Whitecaps. He can get some magic with Ryan Gauld, because it would be nice to have an informed Cavallini with Canada.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, dual nationals are going to have a part of that. We're just going to throw Daniel Jebsen out there. We've all know of him. That position can definitely be up for grabs. But I mean, David, I don't need to touch much on. Ugbo, very exciting. I think that he's going to have a big opportunity to keep scoring goals for Genk and hopefully nail down that position for the starting striker, because it's a tough one to get. He's got some real competition there. Akinola, want him to get healthy. I think that he could be a big time player, and I would love to see him get that move abroad. But I think he needs to work on getting healthy first and seeing where his national team future will go. And then Cavallini is the interesting one. I personally think that he needs a move. I think that he should go back to Mexico. I think that style of play would suit him a little bit more. He needs minutes, and he's just looked pretty miserable ever since he went to Vancouver. It wasn't a fit from the get-go. I think and also with Brian White playing so well, I think if they can, Whitecaps will probably look to get rid of him. And if he can find success back again, scoring, getting in form, he's a different type of striker to have up front, which is why, like you said, in the Mexico game, he was useful coming on, getting fouls. He knows to play that type of edgy football towards the end of the game, and it's important to have. But he just looks miserable, to be honest, when he's in Vancouver, because he's not happy. He's a striker, and if you're a striker, you want to score, you want to play. So we'll have to see how that one comes out. But it was an interesting one because, like you also said, he always produces. He's got a very good goal scoring record for the Canadian men's national team. So that rounds out our depth chart, guys. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I really appreciate Alex taking the time today to help me, even before him. And he had to prep and get ready to get the depth chart done. And then he able to come on here and help us out. But Alex, one last word from you, man, before you get going. But we do really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having me on, Josh. It's a big pleasure to chat about this Canadian depth chart. Obviously, a lot of names. It was a big pleasure to just go through all of that, and big years ahead for Canada. So it's going to be fun to follow along, and I guess we can chat sometime in the future as the year goes along. So it was a blast.
Absolutely, man. And if you guys do enjoy this type of content, you do enjoy the Canadian men's national team, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub as well, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers, friends.